This is the Solar EQ. There are three unusual things about it. It's the fastest dual motor electric scooter we've ever tested for under $1,500. Its spec sheet has a lot of high-end stuff on it despite its price, and it fits a wider range of riders than usual because it has an adjustable height stem and a 330-pound rider weight limit. But there are a few things you should know before you run out and buy one, including the fact that if you go up a few $100s in price, the EQ starts to run into some pretty stiff competition, so we're gonna cover that too. Now, calling it the fastest for $1,500 is a tall claim, but we've got the data because we tested it exactly the same way that we tested all of these other electric scooters, and we're the only channel that does this. There are always different opinions about scooter features. Some people love grip tape and some love rubber decks, but when we say a scooter wins on performance, that part is pretty clear. Of course, there's a lot more to electric scooters than raw performance. So in this review, we're gonna show you what we like about the EQ, those things that you should know about, and what other dual motor electric scooters you should be looking at in this price range. Solar is a British electric scooter company that started distributing scooters in the US in 2022 out of their Los Angeles warehouse. They're the same folks that brought us the Eclipse e-moto, a rival to the Suron, and also the guys behind the Solar P1 2.0 that was faster than every other scooter under $1,400 when we tested it last February. For those of you just getting started with scooters, the main advantage of a dual motor electric scooter is that they basically don't slow down at all when climbing hills. And on this scooter in particular, with 1200 watts per motor, dual motor acceleration is on a whole other level, even when compared with some of the best single motor scooters. Okay, so back to the Solar EQ. What's interesting about this scooter is that while we love the performance of the $1,400 P1 2.0, there were several things we called it out for, and the roughly $1,500 Solar EQ addresses almost all of them, but also finds a brand new way to annoy us. But stay with me because I also found a way to fix that. Let's start out with the stuff we love about the Solar EQ. Like the P1 2.0, it has tubeless 10-inch tires, which were a rarity on dual motor electric scooters just a year ago. But more and more dual motor scooters are switching to them, and here's why. They're just better at resisting flat tires, in particular pinch flats, which can happen when you hit a sharp edge and the rim itself cuts through the tube. Tubeless tires also work much better with tire sealant. And that brings us to another cool option. For 20 bucks, you can order the EQ with tire sealant pre-installed, and that's definitely an option I want. Something that was an option on the P1 2.0 but comes standard on the new EQ are sinewave motor controllers, which give you smoother throttle response and a little extra range because they're more efficient than the typical square wave type controller. Then you've got the swag lights. The P1 2.0 had optional Tron lights, but the new Solar EQ comes standard with more typical swag lights built into the deck. One of the things we called out on the P1 2.0 was that the stem folding mechanism was an older design and it wasn't as stiff as what we expect to see these days. The new Solar EQ, on the other hand, has this spin latch that's not particularly high tech, but it works really well. When I did the range test, I spun it down once at the beginning and it stayed perfectly tight the whole time. That said, it does feel a little unusual these days to find a stem that doesn't have a secondary safety latch. I don't really mind it because I trust this type of latch, but it is something we're used to seeing. Something else we called out on the P1 2.0 was we wished it had an option for hydraulic brakes, but the new EQ comes with nut hydraulic brakes as standard equipment. These particular ones feel especially good. In fact, we think they must be using a new metallic brake pad compound because they have a stronger bite to them than the other nut brakes we've tried. You literally never need more than one finger to bring the EQ to a stop. We also thought the overall design of the P1 2.0 with so many exposed fasteners felt a little dated, and the EQ's design feels a lot more modern. It comes in two colors, black or army green, and I'm a big fan of the green. The EQ does keep the older style folding handlebars and telescopic stem, but there are a couple advantages to this style. Aside from making the scooter smaller when folded, it lets you ride the scooter in three very different handlebar heights, 34.3, 38.8, and 41.8 inches above the deck. I'm an average height guy, so I'm lucky almost every scooter fits me, but the EQ is also gonna fit you great if you're very short or very tall, and the weight limit, as we mentioned, is 330 pounds. One thing you don't get on the new Solar EQ is the optional fingerprint reading display that we saw on the P1 2.0. The Solar EQ uses a key style ignition recognition, and I don't miss the fingerprint reader, but I do miss the display itself, as the EQ's display is kind of hard to read in direct sunlight. On the plus side, the EQ's display does have a USB port on the backside that can charge your phone while you ride, and there's just enough room on the bars to squeeze in a phone mount. A key ignition like this isn't really going to keep somebody from stealing your scooter and running off with it, but it's probably most useful for, keeping housemates from riding your stuff. But if you do need to lock it up outside, I like the fact that the trellis frame gives you a great locking point. Okay, so I promised I'd show you something annoying about the EQ. Here it is. And here's also how to fix it. During the range test, the handlebars would squeak whenever I hit a big bump in the road, just like the stem of almost every Dualtron scooter. But the same easy fix we use on Dualtrons applies here as well. I sprayed a little lithium grease here, and the squeak is gone. I let Solar know about the squeak, so your Solar EQ may or may not have this issue already addressed when you get it. Both the Solar P1 2.0 and the new Solar EQ have the same spring/hydraulic suspension, and it's a mixed bag for both scooters. It works pretty well, but the front is a bit too stiff for my 165-pound rider weight. The big, chunky hybrid road/off-road tires really help make up for the stiff front end though, so the ride's still pretty good. We love the big, grippy deck. Grip tape is a little harder to clean than rubber, but rain or shine, it really helps keep your feet planted. The deck itself is huge at 22 inches long, 20 inches or longer being the standard length that we like to see on decks. The extra room is thanks to a clever neck design that lets you put your front foot all the way to the forward edge. At the back is a good sized footrest that comes in handy during hard acceleration, but feels a little too steep to keep your foot back there for long periods of time. So we've covered that the EQ's trigger throttle delivers smooth acceleration due to the sinewave motor controllers, but you can also fine tune the acceleration and braking intensity through the P settings. You can set it for soft start, medium hard start, and launch mode, which we used for all of the performance testing. You can use launch mode for regular riding around too. In fact, I did the whole range test that way. When you apply the front or rear hydraulic brakes, you also automatically get regen braking from both wheels, which helps recharge the battery as you stop. The P settings give 10 levels of regen brake intensity, and for me, level 5 felt the best. As usual, you get 3 riding modes that you can click through quickly. Eco lets you go 22 miles per hour, Drive limits you to 33, and Sport lets you access the scooter's top speed and full power. You also get an unusual option of running single motor with just the front wheel, just the rear wheel, or running both motors at the same time. For all practical purposes, just leave it in dual motor all the time and switch to eco mode if you want to save some electricity. It is kind of fun having the other options though. Some people think that running single motor saves electricity, but it's really not true. It's been tested. If you ride 2 scooters side by side using the same speed and acceleration, dual motor is actually more efficient and has less danger of damaging your motor or controller, since in dual motor mode, each motor and each controller are working half as hard. One thing I don't love is that when you turn off the scooter, it loses track of all of your last settings, but a couple quick presses and you're back to where you were. Performance is up next, but if you've seen enough at this point and just want to find out the latest price and whether we have any coupon codes for you, there's a link to Solar down in the description of this video, and using it helps support this channel. So, top speed. We mentioned that this is hands down the fastest scooter we've tested at this price, and top speed, always seems to grab the headlines, but it's good to ask yourself, how fast do I really need to go? On the other hand, when somebody asks you how fast it'll go, and people always seem to ask this question, it's fun to be able to say a really high number, and in this case, that number is 41.5 miles per hour on flat ground. Range is also above average. Solar's spec is 30 miles, and our tested real-world range in launch mode the whole time came out surprisingly close to spec at 26.3 miles before it finally stopped going. Basically the same distance we rode on the 9Watt Max G2. If they had a riding mode that would limit you to 15 miles per hour, you could probably squeeze out 35 miles or more. Acceleration is simply awesome for this price point, with a 0 to 30 time of just 7.4 seconds, beating some much more expensive and very well-known scooters. It also reached the top of our steep 200-foot long test tail in 8.6 seconds, only 1 second behind the famously fast VSET 10 Plus. Braking is just astonishingly good, not just the distance, but the braking feel and the fact that one finger braking is literally all you're ever going to need. This means that you're free to always keep your pointing finger on the throttle so you can switch from throttle to brake lightning fast. So then we come to portability, and this is the one area where the Solar EQ is not quite as good as the P1 2.0 and many of its peers, because it's heavier and also the stem doesn't latch down to the deck when folded, making it a little awkward to pick up, but the folding handlebars help keep the overall size down. So what are our other favorite dual motor electric scooters for around $1,450? Well, there's Solar's P1 2.0, but we've covered that one pretty well already. So, what else? The Apollo Ghost is a famously good performance performance value. It costs $100 more than the EQ if you get it with cable-operated disc brakes, and $200 more if you get it with hydraulic brakes, which comes standard on the EQ. Acceleration of the scooters is almost identical, and the ride quality is also roughly equal, but it's not the same. The Ghost has a smoother ride overall, but is a little more floaty and bouncy, and the EQ, again, is a little stiff, but it settles down faster after hitting a big bump. Despite being 2.5 years old now, the Ghost still feels more modern in construction, but the EQ, on the other hand, has the more modern tires since they're tubeless. Then there's the Kaabo Mantis V2 from Fluid Freeride. It'll cost you $250 more than the EQ, but comes with even smoother sinewave motor controllers, has the fastest acceleration of our group, but its top speed is actually 10% slower than the Solar EQ, which is the fastest. The ride quality of the EQ versus the Mantis V2 is basically identical to what we said about the EQ versus Ghost. And finally, something a little different. The Apollo City Pro usually costs a bit more than this, but at the moment it's only $50 more than the EQ. The City Pro feels a bit more refined and certainly more modern. It has 10-inch tubeless tires just like the EQ, but it's the only scooter on our list to have a dedicated regen brake lever, which is pretty cool. On the other hand, the City Pro is missing some of the raw performance that the EQ has, with a top speed 10 miles per hour slower. That said, 31 miles per hour on a scooter is nothing to sneeze at. The EQ brings some strong competition to the entry-level category of dual-motor electric scooters. We love the color, the hydraulic brakes, the tubeless tires, and that it has gobs of smooth power and basically the same range as the new Ninebot Max. The EQ seems like a great choice for riders who want to start off with a dual-motor electric scooter without spending a ton of money. Yes, for a little more money, you can get an even more modern-feeling scooter, but if performance is what you're after, we haven't seen anything that will beat the EQ for $1,500. To find out the latest pricing plus any coupon codes, check out the link in this video's description. Thanks for watching, subscribing, and thanks for all the likes. I'm Paul from Rider Guide. Enjoy your ride.